Over 12% of U.S. airline pilots met the threshold for depression. And now with furloughs, the craziness of a polarized political climate, another COVID lockdown, how are we pilots supposed to cope with mental health challenges, especially given the big restrictions on taking medications? Hey, it's Steve from the Clear Direct YouTube channel for the Pilot Network. More than 1 in 5 U.S. adults suffers from a mental illness. Well, I have good news and bad news for pilots. The good news is that pilots generally report a lower prevalence of mental health issues. The bad news is that we underreport due to the potential to be grounded, as well as the stigma that goes with mental health issues. I've linked the resources and research in the description, and I should note that I've vetted this content through 2 Aeromedical Examiners. Younger pilots, listen up. U.S. adults aged 18 to 25 have an even higher rate of mental health issues, nearly 30%. So just please be aware of your higher risk. And even if you're doing great right now, it's important to know that 1, mental health can change over time, and 2, it's smart to know how to spot issues in others and be an ally, given your interaction with and maybe even responsibility for your crew. Heck, even your family members. That's why I think it's important to talk openly about this. Most of us are type A personalities and have a hard time confronting this topic. So that's why we're going to start by showing the consequences of ignoring it. In 2015, a Germanwings pilot was suffering mental health illness and intentionally crashed an A320 into the Alps, killing all 150 people. This was a case of a known issue that was intentionally hidden from management, which ultimately was a failure in policy and monitoring, so I don't want to focus on it. In March 2018, when the captain of a Dash 8 was sleep deprived and distracted, it led to a loss of situational awareness and a crash killing 51 people in Kathmandu. Investigators said he was harboring extreme mental stress and anxiety that led him to an unfit state. Some speculate that the Malaysian Air Flight 370 that disappeared in 2014 was intentionally downed by the pilot. But these are international airlines. Let's bring it closer to home. Remember the 1994 incident where the FedEx non-revving pilot attacked the flight crew with hammers and a spear gun attempting to hijack the aircraft and commit suicide? In 2012, a JetBlue captain had a meltdown of epic proportions. The Horizon craziness from 2018 wasn't a pilot, so that's mostly irrelevant. So we've gotten pretty lucky in the US and haven't had any fatal airline crashes caused directly by mental health issues, but I do want to point out one interesting fatal case. In 1997, an Air Force pilot flew his A-10 intentionally into the side of a mountain due to what investigators determined unrequited love that caused his mental fitness to rapidly decline. So I guess I just want to point out that just like your physical health, mental health can vary with time. This is precisely why the FAA decided not to screen for mental health. A commission in 2016 found, quote, no concrete evidence that would improve safety. Such testing only provides a snapshot of a pilot's mental health history and does not accurately predict whether a pilot is likely to suffer problems in the future. I know, I was kind of surprised too, but when I think back to all my civilian poking and prodding, other than the basic questionnaire on MedExpress, I can't recall any mental tests. Only in the military. See, in the Air Force, you have a pretty rigorous screening before pilot training, and then annually you take a mental health assessment online. Then your flight doc discusses things with you in person. Also, before every flight, you accomplish an operational risk assessment. You're asked to assess your rest, your nutrition, your hydration, at least in high-G fighters, and also your mental state before every flight. And the good news is that most squadrons that I've been a part of have built a pretty supportive culture around taking the knee, that is, pulling yourself from the flying schedule. Now, the Navy and Marine Corps has taken this a step further. According to the Psychological Center of Excellence, certain dual-piloted non-tactical aircraft flying billets are eligible for flying waiver considerations with continued therapy with FDA-approved psychotropic medications. Now, this is awesome and is similar to what I found with respect to other medical conditions like sleep apnea. Governing bodies are realizing that treated conditions are generally safer than creating a culture that promotes hiding treatment or going untreated altogether. So here's what the FAA is doing. According to The Hill, they're, quote, enhancing training for aviation medical examiners so they can better spot mental health warning signs, issuing guidance to airlines to promote best practices about pilot support programs, and expanding pilot assistance programs. We'll get to some of those resources in a bit, but I want to bog briefly on medication and CBD, since I have a suspicion that's why a lot of you are watching this. There is a process for you and your AME to get you a special issuance after a period of ground testing one of 4 medications known as SSRIs. These specific medications are Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, and Celexa. That's it. The ground test period is 6 months and requires a lot of paperwork and is by no means guaranteed to get you a special issuance. The FAA's decision matrix chart is linked below so you can learn more. Also, if you're prescribed one of these medications for situational depression, you'll be grounded until you're doing well off the med, plus 60 days before regaining your clearance to fly. So let's touch on CBD and cannabis, since as of today, 36 states have legalized medical marijuana and 4 more just voted to legalize recreational cannabis. So it's clearly prevalent. According to the WHO, CBD is widely accepted as an effective treatment for anxiety and PTSD. But an AOPA lawyer weighed in on a recent article. Now, the language is a bit tricky. He's a lawyer. But he said, quote, "A pilot needs to use caution not to use CBD to self-medicate and then not report that use on an application for a medical certificate. While listing CBD will cause the FAA to view the application with great scrutiny and possibly deny the application, not listing it could lead to revocation of the pilot's existing medical certificate and all pilot certificates for making a false statement. So if you roll the bones, be warned that not all CBD is THC free. And THC, of course, is illegal for pilots since we fly under federal code and are susceptible to DOT drug testing, which includes THC. I'll link an interesting article below where the FAA says, quote, "We need to understand much more before considering the use of marijuana and its derivatives for airman certificate holders. Please also be aware that no special issuances have been granted for conditions treated with medical marijuana." Okay, so let's back way up. Getting a prescription for medication means you've already sought help, and that's great. But I'm guessing deciding to get help in the first place is the hardest thing given our potential career consequences, not to mention the stigma. I'll go out on a limb and say that we've all gone through periods where we've felt sad, lost interest, and had some insomnia, right? Well, those are 3 symptoms of depression. Should we have sought help immediately? Well, if those feelings have passed and we've recovered, probably not. But I think that's the key here. If you haven't recovered, symptoms start adding up or intensifying and you think they could affect your work performance, well, that's the time to get help. Or perhaps even sooner. But how? A proportional response seems reasonable. Get the level of care you think you need. So let's list some options. Now, I think it's responsible to say here, if it's crisis time, call 911. Remember that Harvard-reviewed study? It found over 4% of airline pilots had thoughts of harming themselves in the last 2 weeks. But again, let's back up. Talking with a friend, family member, or therapist seems to be the first step I've found on the resources I'll list in a second. Well, what if you don't have someone or don't feel comfortable? Talking with your primary care doc can be a great way to start too. According to the CDC, 1/5 of all primary care visits address mental health concerns, often resulting in at least one mental health indicator. There's no stigma attached to going to your doctor, right? And clearly, they've got the training to help you assess if you need a referral. Now, the VA has great resources if you're a veteran. It's the first link under resources below. Now, I received this pamphlet in the mail, like I mentioned, from my union, ALPA. They have a pilot peer support program who are ALPA-trained line pilots who have volunteered to staff a 24/7 phone line, and all calls are confidential. It also has some other resources you'd expect and some you wouldn't, like helpful questions to ask when choosing a mental health provider and what the heck the difference is between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, and a marriage and family therapist. I'll put a link below to the pilot support program, even if your union isn't ALPA, but I'd venture to guess your union has something similar. Now, if you're struggling with substances, most airlines have a really solid HIMSS program to get you better and return you to flight. They want to reward your courage for coming forward and getting healthy by promoting a therapeutic rather than punitive approach. It's helped nearly 10,000 pilots since its inception in 1974. The key is coming forward before you pop hot on a drug or alcohol test. You know, in preparing for this video, I had this thought like, What if people think I'm doing this only because I'm struggling with mental health issues? Which made me realize what a stigma there really is, especially in aviation, precisely due to our type A nature and because some of the high-profile dramatic incidents that have occurred. So let me ask you for your help in breaking down that stigma. Remember that some people can't simply choose happy, and that mental health takes more effort for some than others, and it can also vary over time. You're far from being alone if you're struggling. Remember, 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental health issues, and 1 in 10 suffers from significant issues. And those stats were pre-pandemic. Anyway, thanks for watching, especially if you're here to be an ally. Take care, fly safe, and see you soon. Hey, thanks to the Pilot Network for sponsoring this episode. You know, a great network can be the difference between having the career we love or the job we need. For 30,000 plus members, the Pilot Network has reconnected old aviation colleagues, provided knowledge in the face of the unknown, and extended a helping hand to those coming up in this awesome career field. So if you're a career aviation professional or are interested in becoming one, don't hesitate to become part of one of the fastest growing networks for aviation professionals. It's truly my first stop when I have airline-related questions, from bidding my line to what's happening at other airlines, to even grabbing a discount on a mortgage. Along with being a correspondent, I've also helped answer fellow member questions about scoring a military pilot job. Also, the TPN podcast is one of my favorites to listen to. They get fascinating guests from all around the industry and ask thought-provoking questions. So visit TPN today at thepilotnetwork.com.